Doesn't really look like anybody else is coming, so we'll go ahead and get started. All right, welcome to Combat Analysis. I'm Kurai from the Iron Mountains. As you heard with everyone yelling she, her, so just yeah. We're going to do our instructor introductions, and we're just going to go around. I want to know name, where you're from, and kind of what it is that you're hoping to get out of the class, so that we can kind of make sure that we cover any topics that are of interest to you. So,
Gus, out of the Iron Mountains as well.
Lil Tanny, they, them pronouns, please, out of Talladega in Missouri.
let's just go this way, starting.
I'm from West March.
What's your name again?
Prom,
that's right.
yeah. What I'm looking to get out of this class is the faster processing of the opponent. Looking for possible openers or saves that will work against.
Okay. How many orders of warrior do you have, Crom? 6. Awesome.
Oh yeah, share with us your orders as well. So then just keep going.
A little louder, homie.
Segue from the CK and
Okay.
How long you been fighting? 6 months. That's
wow.
right. Yeah.
Nice. Welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Strix. I'm from Los Angeles.
Hey.
I want to kind of get past a little bit of the head empty feeling that I get when I walk into fights.
Okay.
A lot of the time, sometimes I'm either in my head about what I'm doing, or I'm in my head about what they're doing, and I want to kind of find.
Like anxiety in a sense.
No, just like what to do. Like, am I thinking about
Okay.
like how I'm standing and like where my guard is, or am I thinking about how they're standing, where their guard is?
Okay. Makes sense.
Also in
Whoa. Okay. All right. Hey,
What I'm really looking for is sort of that seeing how I can lead people into my own and try to condition them.
Okay. Perfect.
Oh, you've been fighting 6 months, and you're talking about conditioning my opponent. I'm proud of you, man. 6 months, and that's what you're wanting to learn. Hell yeah.
I'm Tim Statistical. I am from Andro Bellegarde. I've been doing that for about 10 years. I occasionally dabble in F-Guard. I don't think I have any orders at the moment. In Orange County. I'm here because I feel like I have like maybe a basic grasp on some fight analysis stuff, but I really accelerate what I'm doing and up my game.
Okay. Awesome, man.
My name's Strat, and I'm out of Blade Watch. I don't really know how to wear hear me do F-Guard, so it's mostly Dag and Bell. I've been fighting since I was like 15. I'm 32 now. You can do that.
Heck yeah.
8 years. Got it.
And I just really want some different perspective on combat analysis and kind of get rid of the head empty feeling.
Okay.
Just smash.
Swing.
Yeah, just swing. Exactly. Move the shield hard enough, we'll move. But just kind of want to get some better openers.
Okay.
Tevison from California. I do Amtgard Bellegarde. I've been fighting for 26 years.
Yes.
I refuse to tournament fight, so I have no orders of the warrior worth speaking of. I'm not after anything specific in this class. I think the last couple SKBCs I went to, I took a lot of style classes, and this time I want to kind of see what the more approach classes have to offer, and just kind of see. Usually it's hearing somebody give feedback to somebody else, and I'm like, oh, I never thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also find myself where I'm teaching folks other games, because I'll play some of the more story-based LARPs as well as this kind of stuff, and to be able to kind of have a way or the language to teach a certain topic that I've never before, kind of hearing what y'all without explaining it that way. That's really useful. So I just want to kind of pick up on kind of some of those tidbits.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And hey, man, that's totally valid. Like, I've been doing 31 years, and for like 25 of those, I didn't do tournaments at all. You know, you can be a good fighter, you can be a stick jock, you can love fighting without doing tournaments. That is 100% valid.
Intro?
Corsairs.
Corsair of Asgard, West March, so California. I think this class is just I'm trying to improve the mental aspect of my game along with all the physical stuff I'm learning this weekend. I feel like doing one without the other is hurting myself.
Yeah, valid, man. Valid.
Okay. All right. So sounds like we've got a lot of, kind of a variety of interests, but for the most part, the shared point is being able to take the information that you're getting, being able to actually get information out of your fights, and then take it and turn it into something useful, right? So the goodness is we're going to cover a lot of that. There's going to be a practical aspect of this. We're going to ask you to do some fights. We're going to have you give us your thoughts, what you maybe saw, right? And we're going to try and equip you with the tools to more efficiently make little chunks of information that you can call back to and have responses and strategies for. So starting off, and I apologize, I had meant to print out a bunch of handouts for y'all with with descriptions and with definitions and stuff like that. But they're absolutely I'll be sending I'll be posting the links for everybody whenever we post this video as well. Plus, I can put it in the SKBC event if that helps.
Yes. Yeah, I just had a bit of feedback on that. That kind of stuff, along with what happened in Foundations, I really appreciate it. It's nice to be able to have standard language that everyone knows what you're talking about when you say something.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of standardized language. But okay, so the main thing I want to look at here when it comes to a definition, right? We're going to talk about context, and I might reference micro, macro, meta, and we can cover those when they come up. But the main thing is, who here has heard of chunking? Chunking. Anybody? Not super familiar with that term, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Specifically a combat term?
No. It's just an information. It's like a psychology term, basically. But okay. So specifically, the way that it relates to sports science and studies in that way is chunking is a way to collate a bunch of information together to be easily able to access and to make decisions off of kind of rapidly, right? So, for instance, things like if you know someone is from a certain area and people in that area fight a certain way, right? You think, West March, they do this, this, and this. It doesn't matter who you are. They all do these three things. You've got yourself a nice little chunk. Somebody says West March fighter, you think of that stuff. That's a chunk, right? Now, that's going to change, of course, based on each person that you're fighting. Like their habits and their behaviors are going to adjust. But for the most part, you can make a pretty safe guess of some of their base behaviors off of that little chunk of information. When it comes to a fight, and especially with a new opponent, a lot of the time, especially at events like this, if you don't travel very much, making chunks is hard. It's not this thing that you can just kind of easily do and say, I want to associate these 5 behaviors from this one fighter that I've just seen the first time, right? It's not going to work that way. What we can do, though, is stereotype and chunk game-wide behaviors, right? So when I talk about maybe meta context, we're referring to things that are a larger behavior that's spread across the game. For instance, the high cross being just everyone's favorite, go-to kind of shot, right? You kind of have an understanding. Everyone knows how to throw that for the most part, right? Money being really strong in the meta and everybody wanting to throw money for the sick kill, right? Understanding that that's a very popular shot in the meta of the game right now. And knowing that, hey, even if I've never seen this person throw this shot, I should probably not lift my hand too high, right? That's an understanding of that meta context that is game-wide. Does that make sense so far? So when it comes to a lot of combat analysis and a lot of opponent analysis and making those decisions quickly, you're going to be making a lot of assumptions, right? Where you're going to really start to excel and start to make better, get more wins, is making accurate assumptions, making predictions. And that's going to be based off of the patterns of behavior that you see from people. Now, what we're going to go ahead and do is just get into a quick breakdown of a tool that Tisco and Tato developed a few years ago called a style chart. Some of you have seen this before because you're on the Discord server. The rest of you, it's going to be a little new. It might seem a little complicated at first. I promise it's not. And you don't need to memorize it perfectly. Yeah, if you want to, do you have that? Can you pass that around for people?
Yeah. Don't look at any of the pictures.
Yeah, don't look at the other notes. Yeah, it's a style chart, and we'll post that as well. That's included in the notes. But so what the style chart basically does is it says there's 4 main styles of fighting behavior, right? The first one, starting at the top and moving clockwise, is called direct offensive. And the way it works is it says, okay, Gus and I are fighting, and every time I step into range, no matter what, Gus is throwing shots, right? I'm in range, he's ready to go. Let's say I'm faking or anything like that, and he's ignoring it. He's just ready because I'm in range. He knows he's got the ability to hit me, so he's going to hit me, right? These people who tend to throw a lot of combos, a lot of flurries, they may not rush forward, but generally they're moving forward to keep that range where they can put their stick on your body, right?
Did everybody catch the name of that first one? Direct offense. All right, it's all in the name. Direct offense.
Yeah.
That's what the style is.
Yeah. So that's a good one. That's a good point. Yeah. So for example, right, like torches are generally direct offense.
Oh, I got you.
Dang it. Torches are generally direct offense, right? Because if you're within range, they're ready to hit you. They're throwing, right? And while there might be a couple of fakes here and there, for the most part, that combo is true. There's not really a whole lot in the way of like hit, fake, pump, anything. They're swinging, right? And those swings are real.
They're grinding on you. They're shield to shield with you.
Did you guys fight Diego?
Yeah.
Throw, right? Direct offense.
Yeah.
Tap the sword, and he's going.
Yeah. Next is going to be indirect offensive. And everybody loves to do this, especially with board. It's the people who have all the really fancy fakes, right? They're trying to get you to commit to something, make a response, move out of their way so that they can hit you with a really clean, fancy shot, and then everybody in the distance goes, ooh, right? Because we all try and be that person, and we all know somebody like that. I could try and make, I guess, some examples here. Like Rourke and Nip are great examples of that because they have a ton of like really good hand movement and fakes. And they're looking for you to move out of the way so that they can smoke you. Thing is, as we move around this, I want you to understand clockwise, right? Whatever is before this style defeats the next thing, right? The reason for this is like if Gus is my direct offensive opponent and I'm trying to fake on him, I step into range enough to get anything like believable. If he's just throwing while I'm spending my turn faking, he's just gonna hit me, right? I'm sure this has probably happened to some of you too, where you're like, okay, like I'm gonna kind of do this fake, and you pump your hand and somebody just smacks you. You're like, well, why didn't they buy my fake? They're not thinking about that, right? You're within range. It is their turn because you spent your turn doing something else.
Think about it like paper, rock, scissors, right?
Yep.
Direct offense is going to beat indirect offense.
Yeah. Does that make sense so far? That is indirect offense. Okay. So the third one, moving around kind of down at the bottom of the chart, is direct defense. These are people who generally kind of turtle up. They're looking for you to commit to something, and they're looking to counter you. A lot of punch shield fighters like this, because if they're not directly coming in and just throwing a bunch of shots, they're waiting for you to choose something so that they can block wherever the heck they need to be and throw the counter, right? It's also those people you see a lot in single sword who throw their hips back, create space as a way to mitigate the shot, but they're still throwing over top of it, right? You're using space, you're using maybe a hand block to throw at the same time and do a lot of this countering. And the reason the people that fight direct defensive lose to indirect is because if you're looking for that commitment and you're ready to counter and somebody fakes you and you go ahead for the counter, you've given away your game plan, right? That person with the fake now gets to act on whatever it is that you committed to with your own counter. Does that kind of make sense so far?
You ever fight somebody just pure turtle and you're like, there's nothing open. I don't know what to do against this person.
Yeah. Every time you throw
your hand out,
block everything.
That's direct defense.
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
I know, I'm struggling to think of one too.
Yeah, there's not too many people who do just that. In all these things, people move through, so none of this is a hard, like, they only fight this way, right? Because you all are going to have behaviors that fall largely into one of these areas more than others, but you're going to likely do a little bit of everything. And the best fighters can do everything. It's just they have their favorite that they're really good at, and then they adjust based on what they need to with their opponent. Okay? And the last one is going to be indirect defensive. This is a really great example in the like rogues, people who like to block strike, create a little bit of space, hang out just kind of at the edge. They trade shots a little bit. They catch a few blocks. They throw back. They keep the tempo going back and forth pretty solidly. They don't bail out hard. They're not looking necessarily to counter all the time. They're just waiting for the moment where you've overextended, perhaps, and
Lots of baits, right?
not necessarily lots of baits, I would
Okay.
say. Maybe some, but like the idea being that rather than try to force a moment, they're just going to kind of stay safe, stay patient, and pick their time, right? And yeah, kind of your mid-range fighter who isn't closing super hard, isn't running away, is just kind of hanging out right at the edge. You try close on them, they're moving, never letting you get much closer than that, forearm, elbow kind of range.
Like an outboxer, right?
Yeah.
What would be the main difference between indirect and direct?
So direct is often just hanging out, not really doing much of anything, looking for counters.
And closing, right? I think direct defense is, there's a lot of closing with direct defense.
Sometimes doing a lot of closing, but it's trying to, you're looking for the other person to commit to something first so that you can hard counter them. Whereas indirect is maybe a little bit more likely to throw shots, try and open the engagement, and try to get trades of shots back and forth. And part of the reason that direct defensive does end up beating people who are fighting indirect defensive is just because if I'm looking for Gus to trade with me and to like get involved in an exchange, and Gus is just looking to counter me,
This is my general style when it comes to swordborne. Is I'm just gonna sit here. I'm lazy. I'm not going to commit. I want you to do the work for me. So like, if you're sitting there and like trying to just stay at that maximum range, I don't feel threatened. Why do I need to do something to you when I can just stand here and be like, okay, cool. You're using all this energy moving around and trying to do something. I'm just gonna hang here.
and about the time that that indirect fighter decides to try and gamble or try and reach and try and force something, the direct defensive fighter kind of has what they're looking for. They've got something that their opponent had to really commit to that they can now counter and go off of, right? Do any of y'all have people at home that you're like, man, this person never really moves, I always have to go to them, right? So you kind of all have like examples of that in your head, right? So none of this is really outlandish. It's just putting a name to these behaviors, right? And the cool thing is, if you kind of learn this chart and you learn to kind of stereotype people into this a little bit, then when you see these behaviors, you can say, okay, this person is closing and just throwing a bunch of shots the moment they're in range. Okay, I don't want to try and fake because they're just going to hit me, most likely, right? I'll try and like hang out in this mid range. I'll try and pick some blocks, throw some shots back, see if I can break up their tempo a little bit, or if they'll overcommit, right? If somebody's just standing there waiting for you, you're like, oh, cool, I get some space. I get to fake on this person because they're looking for me to commit, right? If somebody's faking on you a whole bunch, and you're just like, I'm just going to smack you when you fake. Like, I'm going to just aim for that arm. I'm going to just hit you. We might simul, but if I can get your arm to stay home a little bit more, I get more space because you're afraid to get hit and do your setups. So it just helps you with some very basic decision making and allows you to start developing strategies at kind of a really base level by having these kind of chunks. So what we'd like to do now.
We got my part, and then we got all my part, and then we're gonna do that at the end.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
We're gonna come back to the chart. If some of you thinking like, man, this is like way too nerdy for me and like taking all the fun out of fighting, it's not necessarily you have to do all the, we don't approach every fight with the chart in mind going, well, I gotta, chart is just a tool. It's a tool in a toolbox, and if you've ever been in an event where you're like, some guy is just smoking you over and over again, and you're like, I can't beat this guy. I don't understand. It's not like he's way better than I am. I just literally can't beat him. And I've been in this exact situation. Keep last year, I was like, this guy is just tooling me around on the edge of the ditch line. I don't know why I cannot beat him. I went in my head. I thought, chart. Where is this dude at on the chart? Okay, got it. Click back one notch. Use that style that's going to counter him. And sure as shit, I started winning every fight. I think he was. Go ahead.
This is actually making a lot of sense to me because I think a lot of us, especially ones that have been playing for a while, already do this without the chart in mind.
Yes.
Getting smoked, and you're like, I need to change my approach.
Yes.
How it's like, okay, now I'm going to start throwing more shots, or now I got a guard.
Yep.
I can't get into it.
Exactly.
Without being able to define it this way.
Yep.
I think that's really cool.
This takes all the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, it just helps you with rapid analysis.
Yeah.
Being able to quickly adjust what you're doing based off of your opponent.
Is it perfect? No. Does it work every single time? No.
No.
But does it work? Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, I'm always going to be able to beat that style by doing
Yeah.
this. It just gives you a higher probability.
Like we mentioned,
It gives you a quick big thing of like, okay, I can change my whole objective to this. Not have to be like, I need to do this.
Yep.
yeah.
One thing.
Right, and this is where that chunking comes into play, because if you're like, okay, I know that when I'm fighting a person who's just closing and throwing a bunch, what I normally do, that normal pattern of behaviors for me, doesn't work. Okay, well, I know I need to shift to this other one where I'm a little bit more like, I'm a little more defensive, I'm a little more whatever, right? And so you can kind of start switching of like, oh, they're faking a bunch. Okay, I'm gonna close and create pressure and swing on them so that they don't have the time to do that, right? It's helping you switch between these patterned behaviors and these tempos to counter the options that your opponent is using. Make sense? Cool.
So I'm going to go into my chunk of things. One of the beautiful things that we had a realization about this class is when we first started meeting and talking about the syllabus for this. Rose was saying her, like, going through all this stuff, and I was just kind of like, oh shit, I don't think about it like that at all. And then I started talking about it the way that I think about combat analysis. And the beautiful moment was when we were like, oh my God, we're literally saying the same thing.
We're doing the same shit, just using very
completely
different terms.
way, And I thought that was a really cool thing because not everybody has the same learning style, not everybody has the same way of thinking about things, but it's all the same stuff. And just the way I think about it is different terms, different words, different mode of thinking, but it's all the same. So if you follow kind of my flowery language way of thinking and thinking about things a little more emotionally, this is how I approach combat analysis. So the first thing that I want to talk about is why combat analysis, and I think enough of you are like seasoned enough fighters. We're all here trying to learn. I mean, it's self-evident, but there's a lot of people that do fighting that are just like, oh man, I just turn my brain off and start swinging, right? And sometimes those people find success. And the question, so then that does beg the question, why combat analysis? One of the smartest people I ever met in my entire life, his name is Tom Keaton. We used to play board games together. He's just this brilliant tactician. And he used to say, blue always wins. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, no. Think about it. Think about Magic the Gathering, right? Blue wins. Control. Think about board games you play. What wins? What is the best meta? Usually in any kind of generic game situation, control. Control the board. Control your opponent. Control the AI deck or whatever. Control is what wins you fights because it's consistent. Control is consistent. And so that's why combat analysis is, because you can get in there, your 22-year-old energy, and start swinging your swords and shit, right? That's going to work a little bit, but if you control the fight, then you predict the future. And if you predict the future, it doesn't matter how young or how much that guy, spends in the gym or whatever. You're predicting the future. You're faster because you got there first. Does that make sense to everybody?
That person that doesn't think will plateau.
Yes.
They're going to get to that level, but they're not going to get above it because they're not thinking about the fight beyond that. They're just, I'm hitting it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do my thing. Versus you might be below it, but you can steadily keep going and going and going because you don't have that plateau in front of you.
Mm-hmm. And anybody that's been doing this game a long time, they've seen these people. They show up, they're big, tall, and big swinging dudes, and they get in there and they have all this energy and they just win all these fights. Those guys never make it to the end. They never do unless they change because it plateaus. So some of you have heard me say this already this weekend. I look at fighting as a story. It's a journey. And every person that you fight with, you're telling a story between the two of you. and that first time that you swing a sword at one another, that's chapter 1. Now, before chapter 1, this is where the analysis comes in, is that you have many such stories with all these people that you fought, right? I remember fighting him, I remember fighting him, I remember fighting him. Those are the prologues to your story. When you look at your opponent and you're seeing like, okay, what, the way that person is standing reminds me of, Jeff out of Salt Lake or something like that, right? Like, that's the prologue. You start looking for similarities in the people you're fighting that remind you of somebody else, maybe, and that's how you can build that information before your story even begins. Looking at the way they fight, looking at the gear they have, looking at the garb they have, looking at the way that their stancing is, looking at the way that they look at you, those kinds of things. You begin your story before that sword is even swung for the first time. Then you engage, you begin the story, you start fighting. Remember how that story went, all right? That's chapter 1. The goal of you as a fighter in your story is to be the one writing it. You want to write the story. You want to be the one authoring it. When you get to chapter 2, using what you learned in chapter 1, the next time that you fight, you want to write the story. You want to decide what comes next. You don't want to be the one reading it and catching up, trying to stay one step ahead of your opponent. Does that make sense?
An example of that could just be something like, let's say, a single sword or something like that. Every time you're reaching out, whoever you're fighting slides back a little bit, throws a little shot over the top of your forearm, nails you there. And that's just every time you're trying to extend. The next time that you go in, rather than fully committing for that shot, you can start to move your hand out. And then when their behavior triggers, right, that pattern of, I'm just going to step back and throw that shot, that's your opportunity to change it. Now maybe they see that maybe they miss, maybe you catch the block and you get the chance to close real hard and get that kill, right? But whatever you just died to or whatever you just won the fight with holds a lot of power the next time that you fight, because it's very fresh in people's minds as a thing that they successfully did or as a thing that they died to and they want to avoid. So keeping in mind the most recent behaviors from the fight beforehand, that context is hugely powerful for, like Tanath saying, writing that next chapter and kind of starting to direct where the story of your fights is going to go.
So some things you can do. So if our objective in thinking of it as writing a story, if our objective is being the writer, okay, what can we do to stay one step ahead of our opponent? How can we use analyzing the fight to stay one step ahead? All right. So like you were saying, let's say somebody throws a shot, opens you up. They check for traps, they're baiting you, okay? And then watch their eyes, watch their intent. Remember the first thing we said is that, people are, I was supposed to say this, I forgot to say this. People are not pels. You are fighting a human being, okay? Yeah. And you have to keep that in mind when you're fighting. So if we're fighting, all right, and Rose throws a feint for my shoulder, and I open up a little bit and close it, all right, we might be thinking that, all right, Rose is going to open me up with that. But I know that she knows that I open it up. I got to think of Rose as a person, all right? So then it becomes this little contest of wills. Is like, okay, are you going to use that information to go for my shoulder because I opened it? Or do you know that I know, and now you're actually going to go somewhere else, okay? That's when the guessing game comes in. It's not just like what information is there on the surface, but what is my opponent processing? What is my opponent thinking? Because if I'm fighting another warlord, I gotta know that they're processing at least as fast as I am, and they're figuring out things at least as fast as I am. So I got to try to turn that to my advantage. If I'm fighting somebody that's been fighting for like a couple weeks, I have to remember that they're not doing this level of processing. So if I try to do some big elaborate thing to open them up, they're just going to ignore me and hit me. And that's newbie food. That's how newbie food works, right? So it's part of writing that story, part of staying ahead of your opponent is taking in mind that people are not pels, and you have to get inside their head and think how they're thinking and try to stay one step ahead, if that makes sense.
To touch into that real quick, right? Who here generally has seen people stressed out at a tournament because they're like, oh man, I got to win this one. This one matters, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you've seen it.
Yes.
Right? Those people are great studies for this kind of thing because knowing what your opponent is feeling and like what kind of stress they might be under can give you some really strong insights into whether they're going to really gamble a lot, really go for deep stuff that they might not normally, that's unsafe, right? And maybe all you need to do is bait a little more than you might normally. And this person who has something to prove dives for it, right? Now you have a lot of great openings. On the other hand, if they're very like anxious and concerned because they're like, okay, like Fresh Warlords is great for this, right? In their first tournament after getting the bird, because they still have to prove that they deserve it, right? That it wasn't an accident. So generally, they're really anxious, they're really nervous, they don't make a lot of risks. They tend to fight a little, people like this tend to fight a little bit more reserved, which gives you, knowing that, a little more leeway. You can be a little riskier because the responses aren't going to be coming as fast because they're double checking, like, oh, but what if I choose wrong, right? Knowing a little bit about the emotional state of your opponent, it seems silly to care about like what they're feeling in that way, aside from just like, oh yeah, as long as they're not like pissed off and having an awful time, like mad at me because of something I did, right? Paying attention to kind of the state that they're in mentally and emotionally goes a long way towards helping predict behaviors long term. Just because those, we've all had frustrating fights before where we just kind of get a little like, tilted, and we're like, I'm gonna just go in and hit him. I'm gonna just go hit him, right? Because if nothing else is working, screw it. I'm gonna put my stick on him. Okay, cool, right? If your opponent is taking into account that you're tilted and that you're more likely to just walk in and start swinging, you've given them everything they need to just kind of win the fight and abuse you as they please. Okay, and that goes for a bunch of different behaviors, and we'll kind of maybe touch on that a little bit later. But just generally, emotional state matters. Does that track? Cool.
Okay, a couple things that we've done some of this style stuff, and I've talked about. I don't know. I feel like I've said this a lot this weekend, so you might have heard it. What I talked about. First thing I talked about was butt sniffing range. Has anybody heard that term before from me? Possibly. I think I said it to you. Maybe not. Butt sniffing range. It sounds ridiculous, and that's why I use it, because it's funny. So you remember things like butt sniffing range. If you think about two dogs, right, and they're trying to figure out who the other dog is, okay? And we're two fighters, and we're doing that, and we're kind of like probing and testing. This is butt sniffing range. We're two dogs, we're trying to figure each other out, okay? Now, first, when I fight in butt sniffing range, I am very relaxed, okay? A lot of people, especially some of the newer fighters, at this range right here, are very rigid and tight. Very rigid and tight, and their guard is here like this, right? And I recommend against that so hard for several reasons. First of all, everybody kind of feeling the weekend, right? We're a little tired right now. Muscles a little sore. I know, I feel like shit. So, like, if you're fighting like this all day and you're at this range, all right, you're putting strain on your arm, you're putting strain on your knees, you're burning calories, you're flowing through calories in this stance right here. You don't need to do that. You can be in the middle of a fight and be in an active rest. Now, that's not really analysis stuff, but where the analysis part comes in is like right now, if I'm fighting right now like this, I'm not showing my opponent anything. I'm not showing my opponent much more than where my feet are, because I'm not in stance, I'm not in guard, I'm disguising everything I'm doing, all right? So now how do we flip that to analysis?
And you're pretty safe too, because like if we're at this range, like if I go to do something, they have the ability to react. So like if they're there, and I can be like, oh, I see an opening. Like it's not hard to react if you're not rigid. Mm-hmm. And I have to probably extend and be explosive to try and bait on that.
Exactly. It's not really a danger. But the thing is like then you can start looking at your opponent, especially if your opponent is fighting a little more rigid on that style. While you're at this range right here, you don't have to jump into swinging swords right away. You can start testing. You can start doing exactly what you're doing by extending and forcing them to pop into guard, and then watch. Where does their shield go? Where does their sword go? Okay? Because you caught them in a moment where they're pressed and they're just going to react instinctively. What do they do? If they throw a counter, what does that counter look like? All right? They threw that counter because it's safe and it's comfortable. It's instinctual. So you might be able to trigger that response again. Does that make sense to everybody?
This might actually be a really good opportunity to like have a couple of them get up and take turns doing this.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's pop up here.
Can we
Grab
get
your stuff.
two volunteers real quick?
I'll do it.
All right. We got Crom and Strix. Fantastic. All right, so here's what we're gonna do, right? Let's do it this way. So let's have y'all kind of relaxed, right? Whatever. Somebody's going to get into a range where you feel like there's some threat, and just snap into guard and freeze. And we're just I want people to kind of share what they see a little bit in terms of potential openings and like maybe first options, right? So go ahead and fight. Like just start off like kind of normal, and then right.
Freeze right there.
Yeah. So we're gonna come out here and just like walk here real quick. So everybody just do a quick like circle around Crom. Crom, hold that position.
Do what? Yeah.
Red light.
He's like starting to shake a little bit.
Okay. So what are we seeing here? Right? Like what kind of options do we maybe have in first engagement, right? Okay, yeah, stab over here.
Taking time coming for this leg sweep. That's popped up. He has that long leg down there. So he's ready to move those legs. Have to watch it.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that low threat, kind of remove mobility and then attack high. Cool, got it. Scrap.
Initially, when he came in first, he immediately jumped to shield right up. Just clever, like you could just see it, and it opened up just where that's probably going.
Yeah, great call.
Opposing Crom, I see an opportunity to get his arm spread by either striking or just blocking off the spear. A shield between me and his sword. And then on the other side, I see, from this angle at least, is a high cross, but you might know that.
Right.
So maybe I want to make that.
Okay. Yeah, throw that first test, see how he responds. Cool. Any thoughts, you two?
I mean, it's a frozen moment in time. So
Yeah.
Sure, right?
What I'm just seeing right now is sword puts back.
Okay.
So there's some limited range there. There's no viable shot coming from sword and board here unless there's some closing. And if it's sword side closing, the spear is just ready for that at this point. And Crom's kind of in a safe position, even if you get this big aggressive step. The weight's kind of balanced.
You can relax, Crom.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it looks that way always. Like I said, it's a frozen moment in time.
Yeah.
The spear commits.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you really see what happens.
Yeah. Well, like you can kind of make like a first assumption of like, I figure it's probably going to go this way. Like this is the behavior I can probably do. Astro?
As they were walking before Crom got into like that position downstairs, Strix was already coming on sword pointed out the board, almost that range guard. Strix probably doesn't have as much range as Crom believe. Still not exactly pointed towards Crom.
Ooh, good catch.
That just might just be part of the way he stepped into it. It might be that just one thing of it when he stepped in. His shield was a tiny bit lower. They brought it up a little bit to cover his body. Beard. Listen, beard.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
For Crom, while he had the down spear slightly off the ground, it's still not very hard, and his arms almost locked up. So there's not a lot of forward motion that he can do with it without either pulling back his arm or trying to engage with it. So it looks very much more like he's just trying to block off this entire outside line.
Okay. Cool.
I think that's a valid observation.
Yeah.
The way I was reading this, I saw Crom is putting up some bullshit. Crom was like, boogie, 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 and like trying to provoke a response, it looked like. And so I think hit the nail on the head. This is not a viable way to throw a shot, but he's creating it's almost like a peacock spreading open, right? Like, look at this. And I don't think Strix was buying it. I think because Strix is relaxed.
Yeah.
Strix is kind of like, nah.
Yeah, totally.
I'm
still gonna
show you this shoulder. I'm not really, doing much. I think you nailed it.
Get our my actual thought process there, because as soon as Kron came up, remember when he came up, we were actually closer. I took a step back to the right, and my thought was, that's probably coming from my hip, but then if I'm ready for that and I can step through it and block low, then I've just got to deal with the single sword once I'm past the courtesy padding.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
That was my thought process in that exact second, I think, in stepping back. But
And question for you on that, was that because specifically of Kron's behavior, or also was there any of that you're like, I've fought down spears before?
It wasn't even down spear. It's just it's a lot of where we come from is everybody uses great weapons because we're a very insulated part of Northwest Canada, and nobody has any shields, so everybody's got great weapons, and so I'm always ready to run up on anything longer than 36 inches. But then I was more concerned about just please don't hit me in the shoulder.
Okay.
One thing I saw, and I want to touch on that peacock was very much rush me. That's what I saw. Because the down spear was locked in a way that when he pulls his arm back, that spear is going forward. Yep. So that way it's come on, please, you want to rush me, I'm invited you in. Please do that. Because I've got a trap. And your response was, what's that?
Yeah, you weren't buying it. You were like, nah.
So what I was trying to do was elicit a response. Have my spear kind of tilted out, spear put back, more of a defensive stance than poking stance. I have my arm a little bit exposed with the tilt instead of denying the outside lane and kind of want him to go for this. He looked like he wasn't going to buy it. Most people are really afraid of that pocket stab.
Yeah.
So you probably could have got me with it, honestly.
My initial thought was, I want you to do something that I can read. If anything tricky comes, I can pull this back, maybe pop this. I saw a little bit of your shield side shoulder, and that's kind of one of the money shots. That's basically threatening.
Yeah, that's always what I'm more afraid of with a down spear.
I couldn't decide if you were were you baiting that or no? Okay.
I'm not good with shield.
No, fair enough.
All right. Thank you both. Let's do this again. Can we get 2 new people?
2 fresh people.
Yeah.
Ideally of similar experience levels if possible.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, so tap off like normal. Let's just
tap off and then go to where
just like you're gonna fight, and we'll freeze you when we're. Freeze. Cool. We got a nice push, right?
What do we see?
Take a walk around if you need to.
You want me to do the foot switch or no?
Either way, you're fine.
Either way.
Yeah. Right. And remind me of your name.
Seamus the Mystical.
Seamus, that's right. Is the mystical the full thing?
Okay.
We're
gonna say it every time.
All right, so Seamus the mystical here makes a really nice aggressive step, right?
Strap.
I see Tordic has their sword and low, blocking denying the money shot right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
He also has his shield a little projected out so that while it's still covering a lot of his body, he still has a lot of vision without having to worry about. He can move his sword around without having to worry about.
Think about what they did, where they were, where they are now. What was that reaction? What did they do?
Straight back.
Yeah. It was a lot closer when they were there. As soon as that aggressive stuff happened, he kind of projected out. He was ready.
But he stepped back and not actually giving much space. So, but now all this.
Okay.
What else do we see?
Tordic, what were you thinking with that?
I was thinking I didn't want to play his game.
Okay.
So if he aggressed on me, I step back with this foot like this because I do more distance. But like as I mentioned, the gear stays there.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on his next move, if I want to, I can go right back to where I was.
Yeah, you're leaving yourself
Be
options.
close if I want to engage that way, and if I don't, I'm already back here and I can walk away and reset if I want to.
Perfect.
And
Seamus the mystical.
Seamus.
The mystical.
The mystical.
Sorry, the mystical thing. Seamus the mystical or the mystical thing?
Seamus I forgot.
This is harder than pronouns.
As he came up, he sort of brought his shield and his sort of pretty high.
Yeah.
Trying to like almost opening up his lower half, almost seeing try to bait that lower strike, and also sort of draw his vision up a little higher. His shield's like really all the way up to his face, which I think is that too high. I don't really fight with shield, so I'm not familiar with it.
So the little bit I'll give on that is with the round shield, one of the feedback things I got is you get the shoulders a lot. So I try to keep it mustache height so that this actually covers
So
my
that covers?
shoulders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't really fight shield, so I'm not. I don't really fight with shield.
Okay. But it's a good question.
Go ahead.
The opportunity shots that he might have on him.
Yeah.
Whether a nice shot or a dark side. So that doesn't hit.
Okay.
I can see that. Yeah.
And he might also be inviting that in.
Yeah.
Because he went high. Like, oh look, here's my juicy bit. He's hit that.
Yeah,
So that way he can punish.
that's that bait.
Yeah.
So Tordex said something a little bit ago, right, that I want to touch on, and it kind of is the reason that we're here, right? You said, I don't want to play his game.
Yeah.
In your mind, what game is he wanting to play?
Direct defensive. I was imagining.
Sure, right? Like he's pushing real hard. He's waiting for you to throw a panic shot.
Like this, he didn't swing his sword around. He got into his guard and he started marching at me like he's my ass. So.
Okay, yeah. And a lot of the time people are looking for that is they want to make you uncomfortable. They're looking for the panic shot.
Yeah.
Right? Great, yeah. And so you create space that he doesn't get to do that. Fantastic, right? So this is why this kind of matters. This is why this is important, right? Those first initial impressions give you a lot of information, right? You make a lot of very quick decisions and a lot of assumptions just kind of right off the bat. You could be totally wrong, but generally we have a good idea. Like we do this enough, we have a good idea, right? You may not nail down everything 100%, but you're going to be in the neighborhood.
And if you get it wrong, the next round, you get more information. You get to check your previous assumption and start like building off of it.
So, this was a really good mental game that happened in this engagement. This was fantastic because Seamus came in like, I'm gonna own this bitch, motherfucker. Like he came in like, this is my fight, and Tordex very calmly, no, it's not. Like just very calmly said, not just didn't match that energy, right? Did not match that aggressive energy at all, but controlled the fight in his own way just by very calmly, no, absolutely not. We're not playing his game. We're gonna play my game. Which is a little more, we're going to slow it down, and I'm going to passively gather all the information I can, while Seamus, the mystical, was actively aggressing, trying to get information out of Tordex by putting pressure on and trying to make those fast decisions. If that makes sense. That was great. It was like really fun to watch because it was like, ooh, there's some chess going on right now,
I also like how Tordex kind of basically was coming up, taking up space. And when you took that defensive step, you didn't see ground with your gear.
Yeah.
Controlling that, you have a lot more space.
That was stone cold. It was baller. That was good.
I was ready to fight. I didn't want to go all the way back to where we were. I was hoping, I step here and see what's going to happen next.
Yep. Okay. Fantastic.
Do you mind if I just do a quick invite for looking at like alignment?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Absolutely.
So, I'm starting the fight here.
Yeah.
And there's that first step forward and this switch here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So now there's sort of a single blue. We have our vulnerable zones here lined up. And that's kind of what the foot switch is for, to be able to extend and to move away from the shield. I don't like being against shield. Stuff at it.
Yeah, fair.
But we're not in alignment. Like a lot of fights are here.
Right.
This slight offset is for a reason, and what I'm hoping is that he'll sort of come in and then I can foot switch either forward again or backwards into the defense.
That's so funny because I was ready to.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. He was.
This is the chess game.
Exactly right. You guys called this out, right? He was trying to provoke that response, and he was just like, absolutely not.
He's not giving me anything.
Yeah.
So I'm like, try again. Give me something. Give me something. I'm going to bowl you into it.
To relate it back to Tanath's terminology, that was the butt step.
It was.
Yeah.
You guys basically were circling and seeing what the other would do.
We knew each other's
other.
I think another important point here is that like controlling a fight does not mean being the biggest dog in the room, right? Like, even though you were putting on that aggression, right, and you were like, this is my house, right, and coming in like that, Tordek did not match that energy at all.
Yeah, I'm following him.
Yes, Tordek was still applying that control, and so it does not necessarily mean you have to come in there like this. Like, you can very calmly, very softly apply control too.
You can also be the controlling person by being the aggressor.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't have to be the person on the defense, the person that's backing off and ceding ground or reacting. You can be the aggressor, but still be in control of the fight.
In this situation, I might do one of the behavioral switches. Like, okay, direct offense, he's not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Let me switch to something. If he's doing this, he's indirect defense. So I'm just going to switch to direct defense and make it
There you go.
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
Is everybody following along with all that? You're kind of seeing where these little ideas click together? Making sense? Cool.
So we do two more?
Let's move on.
Okay.
That way they get the chance to actually hit each other too.
Fair enough. Do we want to move right to that? I've mostly covered everything on me.
Yeah, let's actually do that. So here's what we're going to do next. Grab your gear, pair up, and what I want you to do is fight, 3 fights?
Yeah.
Do 3 fights, just how you feel comfortable, right? Fight the fight. But what I want you to do is pay attention to behaviors that your opponent is displaying, because after those 3, we're going to meet back up, and you're going to tell us where they are, perhaps on the style chart, and any like behaviors or patterns that you might have noticed during that led you to that decision. Okay? Everybody cool with that? All right, grab your gear, pair off.
Should we ask them to fight consistently, or just have them do it?
Just have them do it, however.
Yes, that's okay. The way you analyze body movement, wrist strain, all of that, I was like, this isn't your first fighting thing, is it?
You're 2 months in, right?
I started Asgard in August last year.
I'm so proud of you, man. I'm so proud of you.
It does. It really does.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No,
Everybody have a pair? Yeah.
We have 8. Yeah. Yeah.
Just random off the cuff exercise you came up with went so well. That was fantastic. Hell yeah.
Thank you both for everything, like so far, your interjections and your descriptions are fantastic.
I'm having a great time.
This is almost identical to Fred Matt's class.
Oh, really? It's all the same. It's always all the same.
Even like how you guys are like deep drills and exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, your classes went well, so hey, I guess we're just following with it.
It's just a different name.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And you can talk amongst yourselves too about that.
I took a different approach because I talked about it. Why do the same exact thing? So, yeah, that's true.
I love how these guys are like a couple months in, and like A, at SKBC, B, like, you know, like the way he was talking about the fight, you know, like it's cerebral, man. Like,
Traveled pretty far too.
Yeah. A couple of these folks drove down from Canada, like drove down.
wild. I love that, man. Fighting's not dead, not yet.
Oh, it's yeah. We don't have to worry.
Oh yeah. I like to switch it up. I'm like, okay, what's not working? My normal games aren't getting in there, so you gotta be hyper aggressive and make that force that open.
Tordek? Yeah.
You're watching them, definitely like I'm gonna do something and get them to come in.
Yeah.
And back off.
He's laying little traps like a goblin.
And it wasn't just your shield, get your stance. Yeah, everything. That's
Yeah.
something
I'm gonna cry. This is so beautiful. These little boys talking about fight.
Proud mommy.
Proud mommy. Oh my god! All of YouTube's gonna hear all this bullshit. Not at all. No, not at all.
2 to 3 fights and then bring it back in.
I have no idea.
Go ahead and bring it in, y'all.
Maybe.
Well, that's great. I'm glad. There's going to be more. All right.
All right. Quick review of the chart. What's the top one? What's the first one? Direct?
Direct offense.
Next.
Indirect offense.
Indirect offense. Next.
Direct defense.
Next.
Indirect defense.
Yes. All right.
Fantastic. Good job. All right, now let's go around. You two fought each other, right?
Yeah.
Strix, what style did you? Where do you think Crom is on the style chart?
It was in the beginning. It was a lot of indirect offensive. It was a lot of like throwing things that to like trying to bait me out with my shield with the down spear and stuff. And then as I started to kind of tighten up and close down the lanes and stuff and not buy into it a little bit more, it got to be a little bit more aggressive.
A little more direct. Okay.
Direct offensive. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Is
Crom?
that tracks? You feel the same way?
I would say Chris was at first playing direct defensive, just kind of seeing what I wanted to do, trying to gain that information without exposing himself. After he got a little bit more of a read on me, switched to direct offensive. Basically, I know what you're kind of trying to do, and now I'm going at you.
Okay. Is that track?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Nice.
It was just like I just want your spear arm now. Yeah.
Good job, guys. Good job.
That's exactly how it
Yeah. Fantastic.
Worked out.
Yeah.
Let's keep going.
I think he was fighting. It was more of like direct defense. He immediately switched to direct offense.
Mhm.
So when he saw Melbourne coming in, for a while, so you have a lot of confidence. So I saw that like immediately when you saw it, just a little bit of shoulder or something like that, you would just immediately go for that.
Is that track?
Yeah, I also wanted to press opposite quadrants.
Okay.
So I had to throw something to the shoulder to
Yeah.
get validity. So when I snaked down here, there was actual threat, credible threat up there.
I agree. I felt like because I saw a few of your fights, I felt like I saw some indirect offense from you. Like you'd open up and then wham, and throw to that side.
I felt like I couldn't legitimately fake unless what that shot I was faking had credibility.
Makes sense.
I was fighting you yesterday too. You were very good for that. Yeah.
Real.
Yeah.
For him, I feel like it was direct offense. It wasn't a spam of shots, but I didn't feel, and I don't know his intent. I just know what I felt as the recipient.
Mhm.
I didn't feel that any of his shots were without the deliberate intent to land.
Okay.
There were shots coming to the arm, shots below the top, shots that were shooting to the hip, and they were full shots.
Okay.
And so I feel that tracks more with direct offense. It just doesn't necessarily relate to like the shot spamming portion of direct offense.
Gotcha.
Right.
But all of the shots that went out were deliberate shots. As the recipient, that's what I thought.
Is that track?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Makes sense.
Like, I was trying to mirror match in the sense of like what he was doing.
Okay.
Like,
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's fair.
I was like, I guess this guy that has more experience. I don't have any. What do I do? Well, I guess.
Fair enough.
All your shots felt real. Every shot that you threw felt like if I didn't respect it, it would have landed.
Fantastic.
Give yourself some credit, man. You're doing really well for how long you've been doing this. You're doing really, really well. Yeah. Yeah. Some of us been doing this a really, 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 really long time, dude. You're doing amazing. I promise you.
Astra?
All right. Scrap. I'm solid. Scrap and I actually fight very similarly. We're both very indirect offensive fighters, and I defensive fighters. So we actually got to the point where we were definitely way within bigger than measure, and we were still both down here. And we would hate each other figure it out. Your guard's actually really solid. Every time I tried to open you up and put a hit, you pretty much always.
Former company mate.
Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, no, you're pretty solid in that. It's just, and I did you a tiny bit of a service study because I very consciously try to switch up my style whenever I fight. So, but you were really solid in that. You were having your guard down, but ready to just bring it up just enough, and you have the muscle memory. So it was very solid.
Fantastic.
Is that track? Is that
Battle tracks.
Okay.
As far as your style, like you said, we're both pretty similar. We did switch it up a little bit, trying to so we could see different styles. But yeah, you're pretty well the same. Your guard was solid, especially for as long as you were. That's insane. But your guard was you always were ready to at least counter at some point, and it felt like a really solid matchup.
So where would you say that he was on the chart?
Probably more indirect.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah.
Does that track make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect.
Fantastic. And then you guys got to have your fight here. I heard you both talking a bunch.
Yeah, that was great. We were loving it.
Great conversation.
Yeah. So what did you feel?
On the circle, I would say he started with direct defense this time.
Okay.
He still approached me, but in a different way. It was more casual, or a little more casual. Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't as hard step, like I'm ready to fire a shot off. He was just like approaching into that range. And then once he did get close enough, he threw some solid shots. I felt like all your shots were meant to kill me. You didn't snipe at my arm here, didn't feel like, or my shield arm, which with these ovals, you can actually get in there and get that shield arm more often than you think. So with that information, I felt a little safer with some of the shots I could throw. And like, okay, he wants my body. If I protect my body, I can still lean around and stuff.
This right here, this is combat analysis. This is combat analysis. This is it right here.
Imagination.
And then once he started applying the pressure, I would say it turned into direct offense. He's like, okay, now I'm in range and I'm going to get him and get those shots in.
Yes.
Agree?
Yeah, so yeah, I was definitely coming up. We talked about it like after our first thing. We're like, okay, so I'm approaching differently. My first thing is he's a more agile fighter, so I can't catch him. And that's always my first test is, can I catch this person?
Right.
So if I can't, then I'm here and here. He's doing indirect defense kind of and trying to kind of bait me into throwing something a little bit. With the range thing, I don't want to range fight with you because you're hanging out way out here. That is, it's like you were saying, I'm not going to play your game. So I'm not even going to try and throw those. I'm trying to pull you in.
No, that makes sense. So it's perfect.
Is this track? Is the track? You say?
The thing is, he did it to me then. So he was in indirect defense, and as soon as I started going direct offense to like capitalize on the fact that he got so close, the next fight, he did his indirect thing. And when I did a big step, he switched from indirect. You know, it was a bait. It was like a style switch bait, I think, where he was indirect defense, and as soon as I did something, he switched over to like being like more indirect offense on the approach, and he pinned both my shield and my sword with the oval.
Oh wow, nice.
I didn't have an opening. So.
You made one. Nice. Heck yeah.
So something I want to touch on that each of y'all like should have done right. The important thing about this is the testing, is the finding out, is the I think they're going to do this, but right. And there is probably a thing that you saw them, like you saw your opponent throw a couple of times or like that. They seem to kind of like be comfortable throwing off first, right? These patterns, along with the understanding of what kind of stylistic choices they're making, can take you really, really, really far in your fights and in your understandings. Now, in tournament situations, right, you really don't have a whole lot of time to figure stuff out. So these initial approaches, the initial tests, are really important. Tanath mentioned something earlier called checking for traps, right? Who here is familiar with that term? You kind of, right? So there's a bunch of you who kind of aren't. Generally, the idea of checking for traps is if I'm fighting Seamus here.
The Mystic.
Huh?
Seamus the Mystic.
Seamus the Mystical, sorry. Right, and we tap off, and you know, I haven't done anything yet. Seamus isn't really necessarily giving me a whole lot, right? I can make my assumptions from this, but if I really want to start finding things out, right, the next thing is to start throwing fakes, right? Because that little pump, what happens? He starts to move. He responds that way. He immediately recovers and brings it back up, but I know he considers this to be a spot that he's going to have to move to block. So if he feels like he has to move to block this, what does that mean? Right? Other places open up. But here's the thing, if your opponent feels like they have to move to block something, something else becomes available, right? I could probably dig and like get this if I bend a little bit and lean. But generally, the way that like the geometry of our body works, if you'll just stand up straight, put your gear down by your side, right? If I can touch Seamus's chest, right? Can't touch his hips, not without leaning or like dipping, right? Because of the way that our shoulders work, that kind of circle. So if we're formed up, I'm throwing this and he feels the need to like dip to block that, that's great. I can't actually hit that, right? This is a lot closer. This area up here, if I throw or I pump down, he drops, the option to now come up higher is way more viable, right? Because his guard's out of the way and this is my longest point, right? But that's those kind of little tests that you can do, especially if, yeah, he's coming in, you said earlier, you noticed that direct defensive, he's looking for the counter, right? And what do we say was the style that beats direct defensive? Indirect, yeah, there you go, right? Because you're faking. He's looking for something to really bite on. So you give him something, he tells you what his response to that thing is, and you go from there. Right? Now, when it comes to writing that story, as Tanath was saying earlier, he can keep doing the same thing again if he wants to and think, I will just block harder, right? I'll do it better, whatever that means. Or he can take into account, okay, well, she faked and then smoked me last time, so chances are she might use that same strategy again. How am I going to adjust? She fake, I'm a hitter, right? We tap off the next time, and I'm, aha, right? And since last time he knows that he got smoked, he might just fucking hit me, right? Which is totally fine. Like that's how this game goes. That's how this back and forth happens. So for the next part, what I'd like you to do is we're going to pair up again, try and find new opponents, okay? And I want you to fight, let's say 5 times, right? That should be enough to, 1, figure out where they are on the chart. And if you need to take a second between some of these fights and like think about it for a second, talk through it yourself, or even talk to your opponent, whatever, right? Figure it out, make some guesses, and then the next time, that next couple of fights that you have, I want you to try and make some very specific adjustments. Check for traps, kind of look for really strong tells about where they are and how you can exploit that quickly. Does that make sense? Everybody cool with that? All right, get your gear, pair off with someone new. Do 5 fights.
I'm going to grab some water real quick.
Yeah, could you grab me